America's biggest geopolitical faux pas that will end its own hegemony, bringing Russia, China, and Iran together. Interestingly, back in the 1990s, prominent American geopolitical experts like Brzezinski warned about this precise alliance, but the hubris and ego of the globalists were too big to listen. Now, the three civilizational states have become the most formidable obstacle to American imperialism. Welcome to Geopolitics Demystified. I'm your host, S.L. Canthan. We bring in perspectives you do not see or hear in the mainstream media. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Driven by irrational hatred towards Russia, contempt towards the Chinese political and economic systems, and overconfidence about establishing dominance in the Middle East, the managers of the U.S. empire have dug their own grave. Let us examine this amazing development in geopolitics. A quick look at the map of Russia, China, and Iran shows why this alliance is powerful. They form a triangle that will dominate much of Asia. As we discussed in a previous shorts video, this forms much of the so-called heartland that geopolitical mastermind Halford Mackinder talked about 120 years ago. As he famously said, he who controls the heartland controls the world island, and who he controls the world island controls the world. By world island, he is referring to Eurasia, Europe plus Asia. Thus, to maintain the unipolarity of the American empire, it has to either befriend or conquer these three countries, Russia, China, and Iran. That is why we are seeing hybrid wars against all these countries. Notice that these countries do not have any American military bases. That's always the first sign of whether a country will be considered an ally or an enemy of the U.S. Plus, these countries do not buy any weapons from the U.S. And they have their own independent foreign policy and independent media. Also, they do not open up their economies so that the vital sectors get swallowed by Western corporations. The fact is that although the U.S. talks endlessly about freedom, any country that is free from American control becomes an enemy of the U.S. Why these three countries are targeted? There are also very pragmatic reasons why Russia, China, and Iran are targeted by the globalists. Take Russia. It's the largest country on the planet in terms of area. Thus, for anyone dreaming of global domination, Russia has to be the prime target. No-brainer. Plus, Russia is really rich in natural resources, not just oil, natural gas, and coal, but also gold, diamond, uranium, timber, etc. The total value is $75 trillion before being processed. Thus, you can say that Russia is the richest country on earth. As for China, it was the largest country on earth in terms of population. And with the miracle they have done in manufacturing, infrastructure, science and technology, etc., China can also be considered to be the richest and smartest nation on earth. Imagine U.S. international corporations and bankers getting hold of all that industrial capacity in China. To conquer Russia and China is the ultimate wet dream of globalists. As for Iran, it not only has a lot of oil and gas, but has a strategic location on the Persian Gulf through which must pass almost all the oil and gas of Arab states like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, UAE, Qatar, etc. Moreover, for Israel and the US to truly control the Middle East, there is one hurdle: Iran. Defeat Iran, you defeat all those pesky independent nations like Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and Iraq. How Russia, China, and Iran have been attacked. Let's see how the US has been attacking these three countries. Target number one, Russia. The proxy war against Russia that started in Ukraine in 2022 is the desperate and delusional attempt to weaken Russia and collapse its economy. The globalist fantasy was that when the US EU stole $400 billion of Russian foreign exchange reserves, banned Russian banks from SWIFT, forced American and European corporations to leave Russia, confiscated the wealth of Russian oligarchs, and placed 1,000 plus sanctions on various Russian corporations, they thought that the Russian economy would implode. The ruble would become useless. And then the people would overthrow Putin and welcome an American puppet. Alas, that did not happen. Russian economy kept growing and became even larger than Germany in terms of PPP GDP. And Putin is as popular as ever and won the re-election in 2024. By the way, the war against Russia did not end after the Cold War. In 1992, when modern Russia was born, the globalists immediately started working on the destruction of the country. Thanks to Harvard economists, Wall Street, and crooked billionaires like George Soros, the new Russian government was filled with clueless leaders and absolute traitors. The goal was to destroy Russia from within and break it apart into small, powerless countries. This is also why the CIA armed and funded jihadists in Chechnya. Also in the 1990s, the US started expanding NATO in violation of promises made to the Soviet Union leaders. It was simply a blatant expansion of the American empire with the final goal of global domination by the West. The biggest target was, of course, Russia. Later, when Putin came to power and drained the swamp, globalists started to cry out in pain. By 2012, warmongers like Senator John McCain were openly talking about regime change in Russia. When Putin won again, the US empire started the regime change operation in Ukraine in late 2013. With the Maidan coup, the fake revolution, the US got rid of the democratically elected leader and installed its puppets. Soon NATO started arming and training neo-Nazi Ukrainian militias. Over the next 8 years, Ukraine became viciously anti-Russia, killed and persecuted ethnic Russians in what some would describe as a genocide, and deliberately violated the Minsk agreements. Well, the rest is history. Target number two, China. China has been a target for destabilization and regime change since 1949, although the globalists stopped most of their shenanigans from 1972 onwards. Note that the 1989 Tiananmen Square protest was a US-led color revolution. Later in the 2000s, the US fomented protests in Hong Kong and even fueled terrorism in Xinjiang. The US really started playing the Uyghur card in 2018 when the trade talks failed under Trump. Actually, the US demanded that China entirely dismantle its socialist system and embrace neoliberalism, which meant privatization of all state-owned enterprises in China. In other words, let BlackRock and other Wall Street firms control China. When Huawei became the first company in the world to create 5G smartphone, the US tried to kill Huawei through unprecedented sanctions. Mike Pompeo went on a world tour to force Europe and other countries to not buy Huawei for 5G base stations. Since then, 1,000 plus Chinese tech companies have been under US sanctions. The Americans even coerce other countries like the Netherlands and Japan to not sell semiconductor equipment to China. All of these are illegal, unethical, and in violation of WTO, the organization that the US created. The US sabotaged the EU-China treaty, which was about to be signed after 7 years of negotiations. The US wages endless hybrid wars, including propaganda wars against China. Like the Chinese Exclusion Act of the 19th century, the US singles out China for tariffs and sanctions, bans Chinese students in high-tech fields, and even bans Confucius institutes, which are about cultural exchanges. America, the nasty empire. Worst of all, the US is arming Taiwan, Japan, Australia, and the Philippines in preparation for a hot war against China. The imperialists would start World War III to protect their hegemony. Target number 3, Iran. Since 1979, the US has been targeting Iran with brutal sanctions for 45 years and many hybrid wars, including the Iraq-Iran war in the 1980s. This is part 1 of the monologue. In part 2, we will discuss how Russia, China, and Iran are fighting back peacefully by expanding BRICS, creating alternative solutions to US dollar, working on sovereignty in all areas, including technology, strengthening defensive military, building new trade corridors, etc. Thanks for watching. Please like the video and share it on social media. Cheers.